Captain Jen Reeves had been to some boring meetings in her life, but the Galactic Harmony Council took boring to levels that should have violated physics. The chamber was designed like a cathedral to bureaucracy, with representatives from 47 species arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. Each species had apparently competed to see who could design the most uncomfortable seating. Jen sat in what humans called a chair, but what the council called a neutral bilateral perching apparatus. It was neither neutral nor comfortable. Next to her, Lieutenant Marcus Webb was trying very hard not to fidget, which made him fidget more. "The emergency session will now commence," announced Counselor Vren, a bird-like creature whose species had never invented the concept of getting to the point. "We gathered today to address incidents of severe cultural contamination perpetrated by the human delegation." Jen raised an eyebrow. Cultural contamination. Right. That was definitely on her bingo card for today. Around the chamber, various species shifted nervously. The Glorpians, who looked like sentient jello molds, were quivering more than usual. The crystalline collective representatives were refracting light in what Jen had learned was their version of anxiety. Even the Threen, who breathed methane and sat in special isolation bubbles, seemed agitated. "Captain Reeves," Vren continued, his three eyes blinking in sequence like some kind of biological loading screen. "Your species has been present in galactic society for merely 15 cycles. Yet you have caused more psychological disturbances than the plague of infinite loops that nearly destroyed Sector 9. "That seems like an exaggeration," Jen said. "It is not," replied Dr. Prelim, a floating brain in a transparent tank filled with purple fluid. "We have documented evidence of widespread trauma, existential crisis, and what can only be described as cognitive malfunction, all caused by human communication patterns." Marcus leaned over and whispered, "Maybe we should have read the cultural sensitivity briefing." "We did read it," Jen whispered back. "It was 3,000 pages about not making direct eye contact with 70% of the species here." Silence. "Friends?" Feathers ruffled. "Ambassador Quillnax will present the charges." From a lower platform, something that looked like a six-eyed slug wearing a business suit oozed forward. Ambassador Quillnax moved with the slow determination of someone who had never been in a hurry and judged those who were. His six eyes focused on Jen with the intensity of someone who had been personally victimized by the concept of humor. "Captain Reeves," Quillnax said, his voice thick and syrupy. "The charges are as follows. Weaponized ambiguity, reckless distribution of non-literal communication, causing psychological harm through intentional confusion, and most seriously, introduction of sarcasm to 7 previously functional civilizations." "Sarcasm is a crime now," Jen asked. "Do not," Quillnax warned. "Employ your human word weapons here. We know what you are doing." The inflection, the raised eyebrow. "These are instruments of chaos." Jen looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Jen. They both looked at the assembled council of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, who were apparently terrified of basic human conversation. This was going to be a long day. Quillnax projected a holographic display into the center of the chamber. "Exhibit 1, he announced gravely. "The Great Whoopee Cushion Crisis of Sector 7. The hologram showed a Glorpian trade delegation sitting on what appeared to be chairs. As each one sat, an unmistakable flatulent sound filled their conference room. The Glorpians, who communicated through scent and took bodily functions extremely seriously, began secreting panic pheromones. Within minutes, the entire station had event. "That was one in-scene," Jen protested. "One bored ensign with a practical joke. One ensign," Quillnax repeated slowly, "who convinced the Glorpians that their species had contracted a synchronized digestive plague. They quarantined their entire homeworld for 6 weeks. To be fair," Marcus muttered, "we did apologize for that one. Your apology made it worse." Quillnax's eye stalks quivered. "You said you were, quote, just messing around. The Glorpians do not mess. They do not go around." They interpreted this as a declaration that humans exist in a state of perpetual chaos and proximity avoidance. The hologram changed. Now it showed a crystalline being standing on a stage, literally frozen in place, light refracting through their body in patterns that Jen had learned meant complete system crash. Exhibit 2. The metaphor misunderstanding on Station Kepler. A human officer told Crystalline Performaz to, quote, break a leg before their concert. It is a common expression of good luck, Jen said. The Crystalline have no legs. Quillnax was secreting more slime now, which Jen was pretty sure meant he was getting worked up. They have no bones. They are sentient silicon matrices. Zach spent 3 days in a logic loop trying to determine which non-existent anatomical structure they were, meant to damage and why this would produce positive outcomes. We explained it was just a saying, Marcus offered weakly. Just a saying? Quillnax pronounced each word like it was coated in poison. Do you understand what you have done? The Crystalline now maintain a database of 47,000 human phrases that mean the opposite of what they state. They have assigned a research team of 200 individuals to study human communication full-time. Their entire educational system has been restructured to include courses on detecting human nonsense. The hologram shifted again, showing various clips. A human teacher explaining jokes to a room of increasingly distressed aliens. A human diplomat using air quotes during a treaty negotiation, causing the other side to question if anything was real. A human engineer saying something would take 5 minutes when they meant an hour, leading to a complete breakdown in project management across 3 systems. You have infected dozens of species with your conditional truths, Quillnax continued. Your hypothetical scenarios, your rhetorical questions that are not questions, your sarcasm that states the opposite of reality. Dr. Prelim's tank floated forward. From a psychological perspective, the damage is extensive. We have documented cases of species developing anxiety disorders from trying to determine if humans mean what they say. The Vereen, who are telepathic, now refuse to read human minds because they describe the experience as, quote, like staring into a swirling vortex of contradiction and snark. Jen felt her frustration building. So what? We are supposed to just talk like robots, communicate in pure, literal statements with no flavor or nuance. Yes, Quillnax said simply. That is exactly what we expect, Vren added. Are you serious? Jen asked. Every alien in the room recoiled. Dr. Prelim's tank literally backed up 3 feet. There, Quillnax pointed a slime-covered appendage at her. There it is. That question. We do not know if you are genuinely inquiring about our seriousness or if you are employing the rhetorical form to express disbelief. This is the weapon you wield. Marcus put his head in his hands. Jen stood up, which caused several species to activate their defensive shielding. Okay. Fine. Let me explain how human communication works. Please do not, Dr. Prelim said. Context matters, Jen continued, ignoring the plea. When humans say things, there are layers. We have tone, body language, social cues, shared cultural understanding. Layers. Quillnax repeated with horror, multiple simultaneous meanings. Do you hear yourself? This is precisely the problem. Let me give you an example, Jen said. If I say nice job to Marcus here, it could mean several different things depending on context. Marcus looked alarmed. Captain, maybe we should not do this. If he does something genuinely well, nice job means congratulations. If he does something stupid, nice job means the opposite. Same words, different meanings. The Glorpians were quivering so hard now they looked like they might liquefy completely. Several crystalline representatives started flickering, their internal light patterns becoming erratic. Wait, Vren said, his feathers standing on end. The same words mean opposite things. How do you function as a society? Context, Jen repeated. But what if the context is unclear? A 3 asked from their isolation bubble. Then you ask for clarification. But what if the clarification is also sarcastic? Dr. Prelim asked. Jen opened her mouth. Closed it. Usually it is not. Usually. Quillnax's voice rose to a pitch that should not have been possible for a slug. Usually, not always. Sometimes. Occasionally, your language is built on probability rather than certainty. Marcus decided to help, which was a mistake. Look, it is really not that complicated once you get used to it. For instance, when someone asks how are you, they do not actually want a detailed medical report. Why not? 3 species, asked simultaneously. It is just a greeting. You say fine or good and move on. Even if you are not fine or good, a Glorpian asked, its gelatinous body convulsing. Usually, yes. So you lie, Ren said. It is not lying, it is social convention, Marcus explained. You expect us to believe. Dr. Prelim said slowly that when humans inquire about health status, they want false information, not false, just not detailed. Jen tried. How detailed is acceptable? A crystalline asked. It depends, Jen said. The chamber erupted. Lights flickered. The Glorpians began emitting distress pheromones, so strong the ventilation system kicked into overdrive. 3 crystalline beings entered full logic loops and had to be carried out by maintenance drones. Depends. Quillnax was secreting so much slime now that his platform was becoming slippery. The human has introduced conditional responses. Nothing they say can be trusted because everything depends on unmeasurable contextual variables. This is exactly why we are here, Vren said, trying to restore order. Captain Reeves, do you not see? Your species is fundamentally incompatible with galactic communication standards. You do not say what you mean. You mean what you do not say. You create meaning through the absence of meaning. That is not Gen Starda. Is it not? Quillnax interrupted. When a human says whatever, do they mean whatever? Jen hesitated. Not exactly. When they say fine, are things fine? Sometimes, when they say we need to talk, do they merely wish to exchange words? Okay, that one usually means something is wrong. Usually, the slug was having what appeared to be a full breakdown. Captain Reeves, you've just admitted that your species has specific phrases that mean the opposite of their stated content, and the only way to decode them is through years of cultural immersion and contextual analysis. Welcome to being human, Jen offered. Dr. Prelim made a sound like a sigh filtered through bubbling liquid. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. We have species who now question the nature of reality itself. The Threeni have developed a new branch of philosophy dedicated to the question of whether anything means anything. The Glorpians now smell test every statement for sincerity. You have weaponized language itself. Jen looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. They all looked genuinely traumatized. By talking, by normal, everyday human conversation. This is insane, she said. Is IT Quillnax bellowed? Yes, Jen said. Are you certain? And that, Jen realized, was the problem. They genuinely could not tell. Vren rustled his feathers, and what Jen had learned was the avian equivalent of taking a deep breath. Captain Reeves, Ambassador. Quillnax, please. Let us attempt to find a solution. Captain, we request a demonstration of safe human communication. Show us how your species can interact without causing psychological damage. Jen looked at Marcus. Marcus shrugged. Jen turned back to the council and made a decision. If they were going to charge humanity with crimes against communication, she might as well go all in. Fine, she said. I will demonstrate a classic form of human humor, a knock-knock joke. A what? Several species asked at once. Just listen. Knock-knock. The chamber went silent. 47 species stared at her with varying numbers of eyes. You are supposed to say, "Who is there?" Jen explained. Why would we ask, "Who is there?" Vren asked. You are clearly there. We can see you. It is part of the joke. Just say it. Reluctantly, Vren said, "Who is there?" Interrupting cow. Interrupting cow who? Moo, Jen said. Interrupting him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The Glorpians began secreting panic pheromones so intense that 3 of them fainted, their gelatinous bodies splashing onto the floor like dropped jello. The crystalline beings started flickering so rapidly they looked like malfunctioning disco balls. Quillnax secreted an amount of defensive slime that would require professional cleaning. The Threem's isolation bubbles began fogging up from their panicked methane breathing. What? Vren whispered, his voice shaking. Was that a knock-knock joke? Jen said. It is a basic human humor structure. You pretended to be someone at a door, Dr. Prelim said, their brain pulsing alarming colors. Then you claimed to be a cow. Then you interrupted the conversation with an animal sound. None of these events are connected. None of them make logical sense. Yet you presented them as if they form a coherent narrative. It is funny, Jen said. Why? 3 species asked in unison. Because, Jen searched for words, the setup creates an expectation that gets subverted. You intentionally create false expectations? Crystalline asked, their voice crackling with static. For entertainment purposes. Yes, Quilnax was shaking, which for a slug meant his entire body was undulating in disturbing ways. She admits it. She admits to systematic deception for pleasure. Marcus, deciding that things could not possibly get worse, tried to help. Look, it is just a joke. Humans tell jokes to each other all the time. It does not mean anything. Does not mean anything, the entire council shouted in overlapping frequencies. Nothing humans say means anything. A Glorpian wailed. They just make sounds at each other for fun. That is not what I meant, Marcus said quickly. But you said it does not mean anything, Vren pointed out. I meant it does not mean anything serious. How do we know when humans mean something serious versus when they do not mean anything? Dr. Prelim asked. Context. Jen and Marcus said together. The chamber descended into chaos. Medical teams rushed in to treat various species for shock. The crystalline representatives had to be rebooted. Quilnax was escorted to a decontamination chamber to deal with his slime situation. Vren called a 30-minute recess, which turned into 2 hours because they had to air out the Glorpian panic pheromones and repair the ventilation system. When the session resumed, Quilnax returned with what appeared to be a prepared statement. Captain Reeves, Lieutenant Webb. We have compiled additional evidence during the recess. Evidence that demonstrates the full scope of human linguistic terrorism. A new hologram appeared. It showed a human teaching an alien about dad jokes. The alien's expression progressed from confusion to horror to what looked like existential despair. Exhibit 47, Quilnax said. The introduction of puns. A human explained to a Voxian trader that time flies like an arrow, but fruit flies like a banana. The Voxian spent 6 weeks trying to determine if this was a profound statement about the nature of time or complete nonsense. They still do not know. They now question everything. More clips played. Humans explaining irony. Humans using finger quotes, which several species interpreted as a hand disease. Humans saying they were fine when they were clearly not fine. Humans asking rhetorical questions that multiple species spent hours trying to answer. And this, Quilnax said, projecting a final clip, is perhaps the most disturbing. A human was asked how their day was going. They responded, and I quote, "Do not even get me started." Yes, Vren prompted. The other human, Quilnax continued, did not get them started. They simply nodded and moved on, which means the first human said, "Do not do something," while actually meaning, "Please acknowledge my statement, but do not inquire further." The opposite of the literal meaning. It is called a figure of speech, Jen said wearily. Your entire language is figures of speech. Quilnax collapsed onto his platform. We have cataloged over 90,000 human expressions that do not mean what they say. Break a leg, bite the bullet, spill the beans. None of these involve actual legs, bullets, or beans. Usually, Marcus added, then immediately regretted it when multiple species groaned. Dr. Prelim floated forward. Captain Reeves, you must understand. 3 different species have established what they call human communication trauma centers. They offer therapy specifically for beings who have attempted to interact with humans and suffered psychological damage. The Crystallini have developed a new medical condition they call contextual exhaustion syndrome. The symptoms include obsessive analysis of simple statements, fear of conversations, and an inability to take anything at face value. You have done this, Quilnax said quietly, which was somehow more disturbing than his shouting. You have infected half the galaxy with doubt, with uncertainty, with the terrible knowledge that words might not mean what words mean. Hinsad, Don. This was, without question, the stupidest trial in the history of trials. And somehow, humanity was losing. The chamber had settled into a grim silence. Jen was contemplating whether humanity would be better off just leaving the Galactic Council entirely when a voice spoke from the warrior section of the chamber. A voice that had not been heard during the entire proceedings. "This is ridiculous." Everyone turned. Karks, the representative of the Draken warrior clans, stood up. He was 8 feet of scales, muscle, and what humans would call resting murder face. His species had conquered 17 systems through military might alone before deciding that galactic politics was more interesting than galactic war. Ambassador Kark's friend said nervously, "You wish to speak?" "Yes." Karks stepped down from his platform with heavy footsteps that echoed through the chamber. "I have listened to 3 hours of whining about human communication. I have watched dozens of species claim trauma from words. And I have one thing to say." He paused, looking directly at Jen. "The humans are right." The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and alarmed noises across multiple frequency ranges. "Explain yourself," Kilnax demanded. "My people have been studying human communication for the past 5 cycles," Kark said. "In secret, because unlike the rest of you, we saw opportunity instead of threat." "Opportunity?" Dr. Prelim asked. 2 cycles ago, the Draken were on the verge of civil war. Clan Bloodscale challenged Clan Ironhide for territorial rights. We were going to fight. Thousands would have died. Karks's expression, which Jen would not have thought capable of changing, softened slightly. Then our diplomat, who had been training with human advisors, did something unusual. When Clan Bloodscale made their formal challenge, she looked at them and said, "Oh, are we doing this again? How original." "Sarcasm," Jen said. "Sarcasm," Cox confirmed. Clan Bloodscale did not know how to respond. They had expected anger, defiance, or acceptance. They got mockery. It deflated the entire confrontation. We laughed. Then we negotiated. No one died. The chamber was silent now, but it was a different kind of silence. Attention instead of shock. Since then, Karks continued, we have incorporated human communication techniques into our diplomatic corps. Humor diffuses tension. Sarcasm undermines grandstanding. Hypothetical scenarios. Let us explore solutions without commitment. Yes, it was confusing at first. Yes, we had to learn. But the results speak for themselves. Draken internal conflicts have decreased by 73%. But the psychological damage Quilnax started is called learning. Karks interrupted. When my people first encountered the Glorpians, we thought their scent communication was disgusting. When we met the Crystalline, their logic seemed cold and inhuman. But we adapted. We learned. That is what functional species do. A Glorpian tentatively raised a gelatinous appendage. Ambassador Karks, are you suggesting that human communication methods have value? I am not suggesting it. I am stating it. Karks looked around the chamber. How many of you have noticed that since humans joined the council, we have resolved disputes faster? That negotiations have become less rigid, that the atmosphere has become dare primirase. It less unbearably boring. Several species shifted uncomfortably. Jen noticed a few crystalline beings flickering in patterns. That might have been agreement. The truth, Kark said, is that this council has operated the same way for centuries. We speak in formal declarations. We avoid conflict through excessive politeness. We take weeks to say what could be said in minutes. The humans disrupted that. Yes, it was uncomfortable, but discomfort is not damage. Vren ruffled his feathers thoughtfully. Ambassador Karks, are you defending the humans? I am stating facts. Since humans arrived, galactic innovation has increased. Cultural exchange has accelerated. Even species that complain about human communication have started adopting elements of it. The Voxians now use humor in their trade negotiations. The Threen have developed their own version of sarcasm. The changes are already happening. But what about the trauma centers? Dr. Prelim asked. Have you visited them? Karks asked. I have. You know what I found? They are not just treating trauma. They are teaching flexibility, mental resilience, the ability to handle ambiguity. These are valuable skills in a universe that is not always clear or predictable. Jen felt something she had not felt since this trial started. Hope. Captain Reeves. Karks turned to her. Tell them what you told my diplomatic team when we asked for communication training. Jen stood, remembering that meeting 6 months ago. I said that human communication is not about having one correct answer. It is about having the flexibility to express complex ideas, emotions, and social bonds in ways that pure, literal language cannot capture. We use humor to cope with stress. We use sarcasm to challenge power. We use ambiguity to navigate sensitive topics. It is not perfect, but it is deeply human. And do you know what my diplomat said in response? Karks asked. The Chemba, she said. Sounds like a useful skill set. Quillnex was silent now, his eye stalks drooping. Other species were whispering among themselves, or emitting thoughtful pheromones, or flickering in contemplative patterns. I propose, Kark said, that instead of punishing the humans for being themselves, we consider that perhaps our galactic civilization has been too rigid, too literal, too afraid of anything that does not fit into neat categories. You are suggesting, Vren said slowly, that we have been the problem. I am suggesting we have both been problems for each other, but only one of us is willing to teach instead of punish. Jen caught Marcus's eye. He looked as surprised as she felt. The galaxy's most feared warrior race was defending humanity's right to be confusing. Tell us a joke, Captain Reeves, Kark said suddenly. What? A joke? Tell the council a joke. Let us see if we can handle it. Jen thought for a moment, then smiled. Okay. Why did the Draken cross the space station? Karks's expression did not change. Why? To get to the other side. Silence. Then, slowly, Karks's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. That is terrible. I know. I do not understand it, Chrysaline said. There is nothing to understand, Jen explained. The humor is in the expectation of complexity and the delivery of simplicity. It is called an anti-joke. So the joke, Dr. Prelim said slowly, is that there is no joke. Exactly. That is absurd, Quillnex muttered. Yes, Jen agreed. That is the point. And then something happened that no one expected. Quillnex started laughing. It was a wet, bubbling sound that should not have been funny, but somehow was. Then a Glorpian started emitting what might have been amusement pheromones. Then a crystalline began flickering in patterns that even Jen could recognize as laughter. Within minutes, half the chamber was laughing at a joke that was not even a joke. And in that moment, Jen realized they were going to be okay. Vren called for order, though he was still making small chirping sounds that might have been avian chuckling. This council will now render its verdict. The chamber quieted, though the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Species that had been terrified an hour ago now seemed to almost... relaxed. Captain Reeves, Lieutenant Webb humanity, stands accused of cultural contamination through weaponized communication. We have heard testimony, sen evidencia, and experienced firsthand your species' unusual approach to language. Vren paused. We have also heard Ambassador Cox's defense and witnessed your people as willingness to teach rather than simply disrupt. Therefore, Vren continued, this council finds humanity guilty of all charges. Jun's heart sank and sentences you to mandatory deployment across all council systems. Wait, what? Quillnex oozed forward, his demeanor entirely different now. Captain Reeves, you are hereby ordered to establish human communication centers on 73 different stations and planets. You will teach courses on humor, sarcasm, ambiguity, and contextual flexibility. Attendance would be mandatory for all diplomatic personnel. You are weaponizing us, Jen said. We prefer to think of it as cultural exchange, Vren said. And there was definitely amusement in his tone now. The humans have successfully infected us with doubt. Now we require you to teach us how to handle it. Marcus leaned over. Captain, I think we just got sentenced to community service. Worse, Jen muttered. We got sentenced to teaching. Dr. Prelim floated forward. For the record, the trauma centers will remain operational. They'll simply be rebranded as Human Communication Integration Centers. Early results show that species who complete the program demonstrate increased mental flexibility, improved stress management, and better conflict resolution skills. You have inadvertently improved galactic mental health. So let me get this straight, Jen said. We are being punished for causing psychological problems by being forced to cause more psychological problems in a structured educational format. Correct? Quilnak said. That is the most bureaucratic thing I have ever heard. Thank you, Vrin said proudly. Over the next 6 months, the situation evolved in ways no one could have predicted. Jen found herself running what she called the galaxy's most reluctant comedy club, teaching aliens about timing, delivery, and the fine art of the dad joke. Marcus developed an entire curriculum on reading tone and context. Even the defense of Quilnax became one of their most dedicated students. Captain Reeves. Quilnak said one day after class, I believe I have mastered the pun. Oh no, Jen said. What do you call a slug who works in government? I'm afraid to ask. A bureaucrat. Quilnax's eye stalks quivered with what might have been pride. Jen stared at him. That was terrible. I know. Quilnax secreted what she had learned was his version of happy slime. The other day I told Councillor Vren that his presentation was riveting. He thanked me earnestly. I meant it was boring. Never knew. You are a monster, Jen said. But she was smiling. The comedy embassies, as they became known, spread across council space. The crystalline developed their own form of logic-based humor. The Glorpians created scent-based irony. The Thrin somehow made sarcasm work in methane. Each species took human communication techniques and adapted them, creating new hybrid forms of expression. Dr. Prelim published a paper titled The Psychological Benefits of Controlled Confusion, which became required reading in galactic medical schools. The Draken started hosting stand-up comedy nights that were simultaneously terrifying and hilarious. You know what the best part is? Kark said one evening, sharing drinks with Jen at a station bar. The entire galaxy is more interesting now. You mean more chaotic, Jen said. Same thing. Karks took a drink. My people have a saying now, life is too short to only mean what you say that is either very profound or completely meaningless. Exactly. Jen laughed. 6 months ago, she would never have imagined having this conversation with a Draken warlord. Now, it felt normal. The galaxy had not ended because humans taught everyone to use sarcasm. If anything, it had gotten better. More flexible. More capable of handling the weird complexity of reality. Back on Earth, when Jen filed her mission report, her commanding officer stared at it for a full minute before speaking. Let me understand this correctly. You got put on trial for being human, accidentally taught half the galaxy to be sarcastic, and now run mandatory humor classes for alien diplomats. That about sums it up, sir. And this is official council policy, signed and approved by 47 species. The commander leaned back in his chair. Well, I guess we finally weaponized culture so effectively they made it mandatory. Good work, Captain. Later that night, Jen recorded a log entry for the historical archives. Captain's log. Stardat Huvan Nozinimo. It has been 6 months since humanity was sentenced to teaching the galaxy how to communicate like humans. Results are mixed. The crystallines still sometimes crash when processing irony. The Glorpians occasionally emit panic pheromones during particularly good puns. And Quilnax has become unbearable now that he understands sarcasm. She paused, looking out at the stars. But something interesting happened along the way. We did not just teach them to talk like us. We taught them that it is okay to not have all the answers. That ambiguity is not weakness. That sometimes a joke that is not really a joke is exactly what you need. The galaxy is messier now, sure. But it is also more honest, more adaptable, more alive. Humanity saved the galaxy by being themselves, by refusing to fit into neat categories, by insisting that communication is about more than just transferring information. It is about connection, understanding, and yeah, sometimes just making each other laugh. Her communicator beeped. A message from Quilnax. Captain Reeves, I've created a new pun about the crystalline energy matrices. You will hate it. Class tomorrow at 0900. Do not be late. Jen smiled. End log. Three sectors away, in a council chamber that used to be deadly serious, Vren was telling a joke about why the Voxian crossed the nebula. Half the species laughed. The other half were still trying to figure out if there was supposed to be a deeper meaning. In the back, Karks just shook his head and smiled. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the universe, a human stood up on a stage, looked at an audience of confused aliens, and said, "So a human, a Glorpian, and a crystalline walk into a bar." The Glorpian immediately began secreting nervous pheromones. The crystalline started preloading disambiguation protocols, but they both leaned forward to hear the rest. Because that was the thing about human jokes. You never quite knew where they were going, but you wanted to find out anyway. And in the end, that curiosity, that willingness to embrace uncertainty and confusion, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not because it was comfortable, but because growth never is. Somewhere in Earth's archives, someone added a footnote to humanity's first contact records. They told us we talked funny. We taught them to laugh. Best revenge ever. And across the stars, in 73 different systems, in dozens of different languages and communication methods, aliens were learning the most human skill of all. The ability to say one thing, mean another, and somehow make it work. The galaxy had been warned about human communication. They just had not realized the warning was actually an instruction manual. Or was it? Context, after all, was everything.